US consumer prices rose more than anticipated in September, though overall inflation held steady. We examine the devastating impact of Hurricane Milton as it wreaks havoc across Florida. And Argentina's lower house fails to overturn President Milei's veto for university funding. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. US stock futures inched higher on Friday as inflation slowed for a sixth consecutive month in September. The annual inflation rate rose by 2.4%, the lowest level since February 2021, but still above analysts' expectations. That's as prices for shelter rose less and energy and vehicle prices declined. But food prices continued to accelerate during the month. Annual core inflation rate unexpectedly edged up to 3.3% compared to 3.2% the previous 2 months, while investors were expecting it would remain at the same level. Meanwhile, the number of individuals filing for unemployment benefits rose by 33,000 last week, reaching a total of 258,000, surpassing market expectations of 230,000, the highest level in 14 months. And that was largely driven by substantial increases in Michigan and states affected by Hurricane Helene. For more, let's bring in Hani Abuagla, Senior Market Analyst at XTB MENA. Now, US inflation has risen by the slowest level in 3.5 years, but still higher than forecast. How will this reflect on the Federal Reserve's policy meeting next month?
First, good morning, and thank you for having me today. I think it came lower than the previous read, that's what the Fed wants exactly, and it doesn't really affect the pace of the interest rate cut. It just affected the amount of the cut itself. Is it going to be 50 basis point or 25 basis point? That's why after this read, we have seen that 25 basis point for the Fed watch, it went all the way to 88%. So I think November, which is the current inflation read, is the last one before the next the election and before even the next meeting for the Fed. So I think it will be a done deal for the 25 basis point in November. So I think
looks like we've lost Hani Abuagla there. Let's move on. Staying in the US, Hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida on Thursday, unleashing devastating damage along the western coast. Millions of residents are now without power and access to drinking water is severely limited. With local tourism-based economies facing a major rebuild, early estimates indicate that Hurricane Milton could rank among the costliest natural disasters in US history. Omar Bakkalolo reports.
The Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June to November, has seen a surge in the number of severe storms in recent years. These natural disasters are not just becoming more frequent, but also more destructive. And 2024 has been no exception. Just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene left over 225 dead, Florida is now grappling with aftermath of Hurricane Milton.
Like this, all this happened like instantaneously. Like these windows blew out. I was about probably right here when it happened. My cat over there on the desk. I grabbed the 2 dogs and like run under my bed.
Hurricane Milton has left nearly 3 million homes in the dark and caused widespread flooding. The human toll is staggering, so is the economic impact. Tourism, the cornerstone of Florida's economy, has come to a standstill. Orlando, the third most visited U.S. destination in 2023, has seen its main airport and key attractions like Disney World and Universal Studios shattered. Stranded visitors and mass cancellations have left businesses bracing for significant financial losses.
We're just gonna keep sheltered up in our hotel room. I mean, we brought books, we brought card games and stuff. I mean, we knew about it beforehand, but we didn't know if it was just gonna pass right over Orlando or not.
We had some other family who were gonna come in with us, who had kids, but they were too worried about, you know, the kids having to wait in hotels for a few days, because that's not very fun for young kids.
Right.
And so they decided to not come.
While the full economic damage is still being calculated, early estimates suggest the cost could reach tens of billions, making Hurricane Milton one of the most expensive storms in US history. So far, the costliest hurricane ever recorded was Hurricane Katrina in 2005, with damages surpassing $200 billion when adjusted for inflation. Hurricane Harvey, which hit Texas in 2017, comes in second, with just over $160 billion in damage. The US suffered 28 natural disasters in 2023, each causing damages over $1 billion. From severe flooding in California to a rare tornado in Los Angeles, these events have collectively cost the US economy $98 billion. As global temperatures continue to rise, experts warn that the economic toll of the climate crisis will only escalate in the years to come. Ömer Bakkaloğlu, TRT World.
For more, let's bring in Ross Feingold in Taipei. He's head of research at Cyrus Consulting. Thank you for joining us, Ross. Now, this disaster comes just weeks after Hurricane Helene tore through the same coast. Just how costly is the damage?
The damage is extremely costly. It's costly to businesses. It's costly, especially to homeowners as well. Lost productivity. Agriculture is going to take a loss. So we're going to be measuring this in the many billions of dollars. And then there's the long-term impact of this, which also has to be kept in mind, which is what it's going to do to flood insurance rates for homeowners. You know, that's a very serious issue that industry and politicians have struggled to come up with good solutions. But as these kinds of storms become even more frequent, then the cost of insurance, if it's even going to be available, is going to be beyond the ability of many homeowners.
And Florida is a major tourism hub. How will this impact local businesses?
Well, certainly for a few weeks, tourists are going to stay away. Orlando being one of the chief tourism destinations in the United States. People from all over the world will come to visit Orlando and Disney World and the other attractions. And obviously for the next few weeks, people are going to be canceling their trips. I mean, I would expect the flow of tourists to rebound probably within a month or so, especially as hurricane season reaches its end. But of course, in the most immediate few weeks, there's going to be an enormous loss to the tourism destinations in the area.
Now, millions of people are without power and drinking water. How has the government's response been to this?
Yeah, that's a great question because it involves a combination of local government as well as federal government efforts. And unfortunately, this also gets wrapped up with the political season because Election Day is coming up. It's less than a month away. We have a very highly partisan environment in the United States. The federal government is led by a Democrat president, and the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is a Republican. So we do see a lot of politicization of the rescue and recovery efforts, which is very unfortunate, but it's a sign of the times in the United States.
And as you mentioned, natural disasters are becoming more frequent. How are local governments preparing to deal with more and more in the near future?
Yeah, it's something that local governments have to confront because they also exist under a resource limitation. There's only so much that local governments can ask in taxes from taxpayers before taxpayers say no more, and they vote out the leadership and vote in leaders who promise lower taxes or at least not to raise taxes. And then on the federal level, we have an ongoing debate between the executive branch and the president and the legislative branch, the Senate and the House, about how much funding that the Federal Emergency Management Administration deserves, FEMA. And that seems to be a very sensitive topic as well at the federal level. And what we sometimes see is that elected officials, especially in Congress, who are not from disaster-prone areas, they will often vote against increasing the level of funding for FEMA up until the moment when a disaster occurs in the districts or the states that they represent, and then suddenly they want more federal government funding.
Okay, Ross, we'll have to leave it there. Ross Feingold, Head of Research at Cyrus Consulting, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. South Korea's central bank has cut its key interest rate to 3.25% on Friday, the first reduction in over 4 years. The move aims to revive the slowing economy despite concerns over high household debt. The Bank of Korea noted that domestic demand is slowly recovering while inflation is stabilizing. Stellantis, the company behind car makers like Chrysler, Citroën and Jeep, has lowered its profit forecast, citing the need to revive its US business and increased competition from Chinese automakers. It's announced management changes to focus on key priorities and navigate global industry challenges, with CEO Carlos Tavares set to retire in 2026. The UK government has announced over $31 billion in private investment for green energy projects as it prepares for an international investment summit. The plan focuses on transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy to meet net zero targets. Great British Energy will receive more than $10 billion over the next 5 years for domestic renewable projects. The UK has also committed nearly $27 billion to support carbon capture projects and lifted a ban on onshore wind projects in the country. And TD Bank has agreed to pay over $3 billion in penalties after pleading guilty to violating a federal law aimed at preventing money laundering. The bank will also face an asset cap and other restrictions, limiting its ability to expand in the US authorities. It facilitated over $400 million in illegal transactions, including money laundering for drug sellers. The Department of Justice says it chose profits over compliance, making it the largest bank to admit to breaking the Bank Secrecy Act. Still ahead on the programme, as the EV race heats up, Tesla unveils its bold futuristic robotaxi, aiming to cut costs and take the lead in autonomous transport. We'll have more on that after this break. Argentina's lower house failed to overturn President Milei's veto of a university funding law on Wednesday. Lawmakers vetoed 160 in favour, 84 against and 5 abstained, missing the two-thirds majority by 6 votes. Despite mass protests, this marks a win for the Libertarian leader.
They're attacking education, they're attacking culture and public health. They hate the people, they hate the working class, and they hate the poor.
Thousands of Argentines took to the streets of Buenos Aires, voicing their anger against President Javier Milei's recent veto of university funding. This marks the second major protest in just 6 months, yet it has failed to overturn the policy. If the law had passed, the university budget, which has been hit by inflation, would have been able to recover some of its budget. But Milei argues that drastic budget cuts are necessary to address the national debt. Although Milei's previous packages seem to have succeeded in lowering inflation in recent times, the rate of inflation is still higher than when the government came to power, and it's the highest in the world. The University of Buenos Aires, a prestigious institution with 5 Nobel Prize winners, reports that staff have lost around 40% of their purchasing power since December. With a better budget, universities could afford to pay qualified teachers more.
Teachers are nowadays paid well below inflation. From last year until today, their salary has decreased by approximately 50%. The university remains standing because its workers want to support it, not for any other reason.
The government predicts economic growth once the debt issue is resolved. But many say the long-term effects of these cuts may not be as expected. Universities are essential for producing skilled manpower, and without adequate resources, they can only partially fulfill this role. Countries lacking skilled workers struggle to advance in technology and miss out on opportunities for innovation. And despite opposition, Milei remains committed to his goal of reducing national debt, even if it means sacrificing education.
This budget project that we are presenting here today has a methodology that shields the fiscal balance regardless of the economic scenario.
Whether Milei will get the result he wants or not, one thing is certain, his presidency will be eventful. Malik Fouda, TRT World.
For more on this, we're joined by Latin America analyst Colin Harding, who's in Manchester in the UK. Thanks for being with us, Colin. Now, firstly, how significant are these budget cuts?
Well, pretty significant, yes. I mean, he intends to reduce the public spending massively, and he's already made considerable progress on that. And there is actually, he's eliminated the fiscal deficit in the first months of the year, and he intends to keep that up. And of course, that involves reducing public spending on all sorts of things, and trying to privatize lots of activities that were previously or are still in some cases the activity controlled by the state. And of course, this has generated massive protests, as we've seen, because many people, millions of people are affected, and more than half of the Argentine population is now living in poverty, and millions are classified as destitute. This obviously is having a huge impact. But he reckons that getting the economy back on a sound basis is the most important thing, and things will get better in the future.
And what are the potential long-term effects on Argentina's education system and workforce after the failure to overturn President Milei's veto on university funding?
Well, that's the great fear of people in the university sector. University of Paris is a very prestigious institution, and Argentines are very proud of it, and it's produced some remarkable people. But the national education system is very weak, and particularly in the provinces, the remote provinces of the northwest and northeast, particularly, and reducing the spending on the Education Ministry has actually lost its status as a ministry. It's now as a Secretariat of Education, which it reflects its low status within this government, and its budget, or draft budget for next year, is drastically reduced. It's effectively a real terms cut given inflation. So of course the fears are that, and as people have said during the protests, research is being neglected, science and technology and so on are not being invested in, and the long-term impact of this will be very serious. Milei again argues that once the economy is stabilized, investment will pour in and all these things will be put right. But in the meantime, things are pretty bad.
And with inflation still being one of the highest in the world, how do you think the government's economic strategies will impact the country's economic future?
Well, we have to see. I mean, if you take Milei's arguments, the next year will be much better. He reckons next year, the inflation at the moment is still well over 200%, as we heard, the highest in the world. He reckons next year it'll be between 18 and 19%, so it is suddenly going to fall drastically because of the reduction in the role of the state. What he wants, and what he said, is he wants Argentina to return to what he calls the spirit of the 1853 Constitution, which is a time when Argentina was only just beginning to open up. I mean, European immigration was beginning. The land was being handed out left, right, and centre. The government outside Buenos Aires barely existed, and its spending, its role was very, very low. And of course, Argentina subsequently became one of the most prosperous countries in the world. So by the early years of the last century, Argentina was among the 10 most prosperous countries in the whole world. And he thinks that if one can return to the liberal spirit of those times, Argentina will be a great country again.
Okay, Colin Harding, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
German authorities have revised forecasts for the economy from growth to contraction this year. The bleak outlook was due to data reflecting the country's structural challenges. This includes dependence on the manufacturing sector and the effects of global competition. Emre Boz has the story.
In the 1970s and 80s, Germany's automaker Volkswagen experienced one of its biggest booms ever. As it grew, so too did the economy. Today, Volkswagen is the country's largest employer in the car industry, accounting for 5% of GDP. But it's seeing sales and growth dwindle, and so too is the German economy.
Different from what we had hoped and predicted in the spring outlook, and we mean all major economic institutes and the German government. Economic growth in Germany this year will have to be corrected from plus 0.3 to minus 0.2%.
This makes it the second year in a row it's posting falling output, the only member to do so in the G7. Analysts say the economy has structural challenges to growth. One of them is the reliance on the manufacturing sector. It accounts for a fifth of Germany's GDP, twice the level of the US. And one key partner in the sector is China, whose economic growth has been lackluster in recent years. And as growth falls, so too are profits from joint Chinese-German ventures. This has been the case for Volkswagen since 2015. Another reason is the lack of demand for German cars like Volkswagen in China, with BYD overtaking it last year as China's best-selling car brand. Germany also has other issues plaguing its growth, and this includes its poor economic infrastructure and the lack of skilled workers.
We systematically did not invest enough in our infrastructure, which can be seen with delayed trains and collapsing bridges, the lack of digitalization across administrations. We have not done enough to mobilize the potential of skilled workers.
Despite the challenges, the government expects the economy to grow in 2025 and inflation to stabilize. Since the start of the year, inflation has been on a downward trend, much below the central bank's 2% target. Authorities have rolled out a growth plan to tackle these structural issues, including tax breaks for companies, less red tape, and other stimulus packages. But for now, Germany may have to bear the brunt of a slowing economy. Emre Boz, TRT World.
The US electric vehicle industry is experiencing a shift as its overall market share has fallen for the first time, according to a report from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Meanwhile, consumer interest moves towards hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles. EVs have seen impressive growth in recent years. In 2016, they made up less than 1% of vehicle sales, and by the end of 2023, they reached nearly 8%. But for the first time, EVs have seen a slight decrease in market share, dropping by 0.1% this year. This signals a potential turning point after years of steady growth. While EVs fall back, hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles are gaining traction. Traditional hybrids grew by 2.2% and plug-in hybrids by 0.3%, suggesting consumers are leaning towards a balance between fully electric and gas-powered vehicles. Traditional internal combustion engine vehicles saw the largest fall in market share, down 2.3%. This shift is encouraging manufacturers to expand their hybrid and EV fleets to meet evolving consumer demands. While overall EV adoption in the US has slowed, the scale of the fall varies across the country. California leads the way with more than a quarter of all new car sales in 2024 being electric. States with the zero-emission vehicle program have more than doubled the market share of EVs compared to states without the program. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has unveiled a bold vision, Tesla's robotaxi. On a Hollywood stage where the lines between fiction and reality blur, he promises a driverless future with no steering wheel in sight, heralding a new era in transportation. But as anticipation grows, so does the questions. Can this futuristic dream truly transform the way we travel? Lara Kulachastan reports.
In the dazzling world of tech, few match the spectacle and ambition of Elon Musk. Tesla's long-awaited robotaxi signals what could be the dawn of a new era in transportation.
Welcome to the We Robot Party.
Ever the showman, Musk presents his autonomous fleet as more than a technological breakthrough. It's a revolution. A future where cars drive themselves, making travel seamless and efficient.
I think the cost of autonomous transport will be so low that you can think of it like individualized mass transit. The average cost of a bus per mile for a city, not the ticket price because that is subsidized, but the average price is about $1 a mile.
With operating costs as low as 20 cents per mile, the robotaxi could reshape the ride-hailing industry, offering affordability and accessibility like never before. Tesla owners are invited to join the movement, turning their cars into money-making machines through an app-based autonomous network. A world where cars not only serve but also earn is fast approaching. Yet, behind the allure, uncertainty looms large. Regulatory hurdles, safety concerns, and years of missed promises cast a shadow over Musk's grand ambitions. Now, Tesla faces a crucial test, navigating these challenges to prove that this bold vision can truly become a reality. The stage is set. Whether the dream lives up to the hype remains to be seen. Lara Kılıçarslan, TRT World.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.